Welcome to the World Away.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
Welcome back to the World Awaits. How are you all? How's your week been, Belle?
Far out. I've had soccer practice, dogs at vets, cars to be serviced. That is so boring. There have been some high points and also some low points because rock historian and rock brain of the universe and fellow travel writer Glenn A. Baker has passed away as we're recording. Glenn was a prodigious. He was best known as a rock historian, but he was also a very keen travel writer. He was a member of the Australian Society of Travel Writers. He was actually Travel Writer of the Year several times as well. So it was really sad to learn of his passing. I had actually travelled with Glenn in Ireland, and I've told this anecdote before about we just spent a week in a minibus roaring around Ireland. And of course, it was so funny. We went to an Irish pub one night, middle of nowhere, down the back of Clare, like literally a crossroad of a pub. And there was some live music playing. I said, Glenn, I want to go out and I want to see traditional Irish music. Let's go find there's some down at the pub tonight. So we went down to the pub. Anyway, sitting in the pub, this bloke comes up and they're playing like real full on diddly-eye. And this bloke comes up to him and he stands at our table and he looks down and he said, Glenn A. Baker, didn't expect to see you here. In the middle of absolutely nowhere. That is how well known he was. So it's really sad to see him go. It's really passing of an era, and he had like over 80,000 records, which I'm hoping the buyer that bought them is going to actually what I understood at the time when that sale was made, because Glenn, who had been on the podcast, and you can jump back and listen to him talking about traveling through southern USA. He said, I'm just surrounded by so much material, the memorabilia, the vinyls. And so we're hoping that the buyer for that actually does open a museum in the central coast of New South Wales. So that's been a high point and a low point, remembering Glenn, and then also, being sad at his passing. He was 74 when he passed away. On another musical note, I also saw Icelandic Chinese chanteuse Leve, who was performing at Rod Laver Arena, because I am so cool. She is fabulous. If you haven't seen her, go take a listen. Laufey, which is Laufey. And I'm also going to share some news from another past interviewee, which is Dee Whelan, who we profiled as that incredible Canadian adventurer whose film, 500 Days in the Wild, documented her 6 years on the Trans-Canada Trail. She's just launched her new project called Flight of the Puffins. So basically expect her to be just immersed in the world of puffins, and she's going to have a documentary out in late 2028. So if you need some puffin love before then, jump onto her Instagram account, which is Flight of the Puffins. That's been my week. What about you, Kirstie?
Yes, well, really sad about Glenn, and there's a couple of other interesting things I read about him. So I didn't realize this, but he was actually part of that research project that established the formation of 2JJ, which ended up being Triple J.
Yes.
And he also wrote 17 books. Amazing.
Incredible.
So yeah,
Prolific.
Incredible man. He's achieved so much. And also I read somewhere that he'd visited 150 countries. So what a legacy to leave. Right. So yeah, not a lot happening with me personally this week. Quite quiet. Must be a midwinter thing. Other than I'm on the countdown to Italy, and it's 4 weeks until I leave. Exactly 4 weeks to go before I fly out to Rome. I'm so excited. And I'm also deep in book edit. So finding it very satisfying, adding that sort of extra layer. I'm focusing on interiority at the moment, which is sort of the it word as far as fiction goes at the moment, which gets the reader sort of a bit more in the head of the protagonist, so you feel a bit closer. So I'm hoping that's what I achieve with the end result.
Yeah, well, I did not know that. That's word of the day for me. So I do love it when you're right there with the character, and that's what makes a great book, right? So this week we are chatting about hotels that have opened recently or in the last few months or coming up that you really should have on your hotel list. So we're kicking off with some to aspire to, because who doesn't want the beautiful dream of staying in a hotel room that only the 1% can afford, right?
Yes, and stay with us because we do have some more affordable options too. But we're going to kick things off in the higher end with Aman, and it has just launched 4 new private residences in New York in Midtown Manhattan's Crown Building. So the piece de resistance here is a 3-bedroom home that occupies the hotel's entire 24th level. Can you imagine staying there? Incredible. It's actually one of the largest luxury hotel residences in Manhattan, and you can stay for, get this, $57,000 Australian per night. When should we go, Belle? But it's all here. It is all about the location. So you get views of Central Park and Fifth Avenue, and there's an outdoor hot tub and a media room, 3 glass enclosed fireplaces, a private lift, and it even has staff accommodation for the nanny, which you would expect at $57,000 a night.
I know. Do I want to look at Fifth Avenue for 50? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, but significantly cheaper. And I think this one's more my bag at only $14,500 a night is And Beyond's 5-suite private safari homestead in Kenya. The sole use residence, which opens in June next year, sits on a private concession in the north. The home sleeps up to 11 guests and comes with a dedicated team of 13, 2 private guides and 2 6-seater 4x4 safari vehicles. So what that means is that you're never going to be sharing with anybody else when you have that incredible life-changing spotting. Of all of the hotel openings around the world, the one with the biggest backstory, though, has to be Dolly Parton's Songteller Hotel, which is scheduled to open finally in Nashville in September. You can book on the site now. Rooms start at about 530 a night, but the top room is the Songteller Suite, which is about 5,500 Australian dollars a night. And I did love the idea of the 6-sister suite, which comes in at only $2,000 a night, but it sleeps 6 people, and it's an acknowledgement of Dolly's unbreakable bond with her 5 sisters. So it's got 3 queen beds and endless vanities, lots of showers, and that's where you all just pile in and have that time of your life in Nashville. Because she's also got a Life of Many Colors museum and some experiential stuff like Parton Live, which has songwriter sessions, rising star showcases with a little cocktail on the side. I just love it, right? Don't you? Don't you love the idea?
No, I don't know if it's for me really, but I think this is more up my alley. But at around $2,000 a night, you can stay at Sabi's just opened luxury lodge, which is called Sandringham Private Game Reserve in the Greater Kruger region. And the reserve's got 2 luxury safari camps with 6 suites and an exclusive use, fully serviced 4-bedroom villa, which has its own chef, butler, and a ranger, which is incredible because then you can go out on your own in the private vehicle and have your own little personal safaris. The cool thing about this property, though, I think that one of the best things, or the best thing, is that it was actually an ex-hunting ground, and they spent about 6 years rewilding it. So it's gone from a place where poachers were going to hunt wildlife to now a complete sanctuary. So I just love that concept. And Sabi do this so well. They have a really strong remit around conservation. And I recently interviewed Jack Schmidt, actually, from Sabi, who was in Australia to talk about the opening. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And you can learn more about that lodge.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had Jacques on the podcast before. He did a tour of the fence-free Greater Kruger, which is where Sabi and Sandringham are both located. So if you want to jump back to episode 53, he is a fabulous advocate for African wildlife and a bottomless well of incredible anecdotes. I drove past the gates of Sandringham when I was there in February, but it hadn't opened yet, so I wasn't allowed inside. But just a phenomenal story of rewilding. They said that they had found a white lion on the property, and they found that the pride that has been living there, it's in their gene pool. So they've seen a new cub being born that's actually that's white. So I think that's just absolutely phenomenal. So there's a couple of hotels in Australia that deserve a mention as well. The Ritz-Carlton Lodge in the Blue Mountains is reopening in mid-2026 as the world's first Ritz-Carlton Lodge, following a 50 million transformation of what was the former Emirates Wolgan Valley. So since 2006, Emirates has invested $150 million into the resort, restoring it to its original homestead, which dates back to 1832, as well as planting more than 1 million trees on the site. And in Tassie, Sapphire Freycinet is adding what they're going to be calling the Jewel, which is an 800 square metre private luxury sanctuary with 3 master suites, an infinity pool, and custom fire terraces, because you need that hot and cold because it does get kind of chilly down there. It's set to open in spring 2026, and it is aimed squarely at families and small groups.
And a few other standouts are Bullow River Station in East Kimberley. That's reopening in May next year. And it was closed for a major guest wing and homestead transformation. And it's actually a working cattle station on about 160 hectares and is also a luxury lodge of Australia. So obviously it's a pretty exceptional property.
It's phenomenal, actually, Kirstie. I've said a few times, and I've got to say the landscape is absolutely ethereal, and helicoptering over that is really one of the great Australian experiences.
Then there's Waldorf Astoria Sydney, which opens early next year at One Circular Quay, and it's the brand's first hotel in Australia. There's a lot of firsts around this hotel. It also recently announced it's partnering with Curtis Stone, and he's going to launch his first Australian restaurant there. And we mentioned this the other week, but Beckons, which is a luxury hotel group, is launching a new ultra luxury property at Uluru near longitude 131. If you've ever stayed there, I stayed there about 5 years ago. It is the most beautiful property, and you can lie in bed and just look out at Uluru from your pavilion. But this new property it hasn't got a name yet. It's actually going to be even more premium than longitude 131. So right up there, exceptional place to stay.
Fascinating. Closer to home in the Blue Mountains, or closer to many people's homes, the Blue Mountains is seeing the heritage listed estate Lilienfels reopen after a multi-million-dollar revamp. This is the Salter Brothers' second property in its new Ardor collection. So, fun fact, it was built in 1889 as a summer residence for Sir Frederick Darley, who was then the Chief Justice of New South Wales. I always wanted a country retreat like that, right? It is a late Victorian era Federation estate with a long history of the high society retreat. So I reckon there's a few stories going on up there. The Duchess of York stayed there during the 1901 Royal Tour. And the last major restoration was back in 1992. So I say it was probably overdue for a refresh.
And the new all-inclusive ever Bloomfield Daintree Lodge opens in November this year. It's a 14-room all-inclusive lodge in the Daintree, accessible only by boat or helicopter. I love properties like that. It makes them super exclusive. And earlier this year, Berkeley River Lodge in the Kimberley, which is also only accessible by air or boat, reopened. And that's a really isolated retreat. And it was in the final stage of a 3-year refurbishment, actually, when it was struck by cyclone. So it's now been completely rebuilt.
I'm going to add one more near Sydney, and that's the Grand Suttles Lodge on the Central Coast, which is Adman John Singleton's property. 20 private villas. Expect to pay more than $2,000 a night for some Australiana, such as sandstone walls and a piano bar called Ned's.
And while all of these stays are at the higher end, it is worth noting that it's not just about how stunning they are, while obviously having the aesthetically beautiful properties is lovely. Staying at a really ultra luxury lodge is really all about exceptional service and the access you get to the experiences that basically money can't buy.
So we said that we'd also give you some new openings at the more affordable end, though. So pencil in your diaries these capital city openings. You've got the Adina Hobart, which comes online in October. Voco Hotels opened an outpost in Darwin CBD in May. In Brisbane, Fortitude Valley sees the new Alva Hotel, which is only from about $250 a night. Get in there for the rooftop pool. And in Perth, the new Hyde Perth, about the same price. It's an Accor hotel if you're a loyalty program member. Down here in Victoria, the Crown Plaza Melbourne Carlton is on the CBD fringe. I just took a quick search online. It's got rooms from $160 a night, which is incredible given its location and the facilities of this 4-star hotel. And we'll pop those in the show.
If you'd like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com/theworldawaits. That's ko-fi.com/theworldawaits, so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best. This week, I'm chatting to travel writer, photographer and author Ronan O'Connell about his new book, Hidden in Plain Sight, a photographic-led book of the world's most popular landmarks, showing the most intriguing, mystifying and jaw-dropping stories about them. Welcome to the show, Ronan.
Thank you very much, Kirstie.
So good to have you on The World Awaits. Let's start by tell us a bit about how you came to get into the travel industry.
So I kind of fell into it accidentally, to be honest. I had been a newspaper reporter at the West Australian in Perth for many years, and my focus was always on like crime and politics was what I had reported on. And then when I was nearly 30, I decided to go do something I always wanted to do, which was to live in Ireland, because my family, originally both my parents are from Ireland, and I was going to go over there and work in newspapers over there. Along the way, I traveled for a few months through Asia, and I met my now wife in Thailand. And we kept in contact for a few months after that. And suddenly I decided when I was in Ireland, maybe I'll take a bit of a punt and ask her if she'll come traveling with me if I go back to Asia. And eventually I managed to kind of talk her around to it. And I went back to Thailand, and we did a real adventure around Asia for a couple of months. And by the end of that, we were, very kind of intertwined. And so it was a case of I needed to move to Thailand to be able to keep this relationship going. And then once I was living in Bangkok, suddenly I had to find a way to actually make some money. So naturally, I just went towards freelance journalism, and there really wasn't any news journalism opportunities there, because in Thailand, they don't like foreign journalists working in local news organizations. They prefer to have the local Thais there who they can kind of keep under control a little bit more. There's a lot of regulation of their media. So I tried to get into their newspapers. It didn't really work out. And so then I thought, well, I'll just have to start freelancing. And so the natural fit was to just start writing about travel, especially being based in Bangkok and being able to travel all around Asia so quickly and so easily. And also I was just really attracted as well to the fact that I'd always been very interested in photography, and it was something I considered doing when I was in high school and I was going into uni. And this gave me the opportunity to do both, to actually write and to do the photography. So it was great to have an outlet for that and to be getting my photos published. So that was how it happened. It really just kind of fell out of the sky. I'd never even planned to do it, to be honest.
Such a necessary skill now to be able to, to be able to take photos as well. Not that a lot of publications pay for them, but so what made you? Tell us a bit about what made you want to write your book, Hidden in Plain Sight, and why specifically you chose landmarks.
This as well kind of really came out of the blue. I hadn't planned to write a book either. And a couple of years ago, I got an email from HarperCollins in the US, and they said that they had been, I was a regular contributor for National Geographic, and they had been following my stories that I'd done for them. And I had always done sort of quite unusual style of travel stories. It was more focused on like little known elements of cultural heritage, of art, of architecture, of spirituality. And so they said that they wanted to do a coffee table style travel book, but that it needed to be something that was completely different to what was already out there in the market, which was heavily saturated with all the big publications from Lonely Planet and all this kind of thing. So, they said, can you send us a few ideas that are, unusual and that fit your normal kind of style, but that are also reasonably mainstream and have got the ability to market it. And that's why I then went for the landmarks, because I thought, well, if we can have, people will pick up a book and see the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, all of that. It gives them that familiarity and that gives it a mainstream appeal. But then the idea behind the book was, what can I tell people about these locations that they don't already know? Because these things are so well documented, the history, the architecture of the Eiffel Tower, for example. So I started doing research into it, and I came up with the idea of, what if I could identify elements of these locations that are not well known even to locals, parts of its history, things to do with its perhaps its interior design or its architecture or its legacy. And for example, then with the Eiffel Tower, I came across the fact that it was originally slated to be demolished after a couple of years after it was built, and that its designer came up with this plan to try and save it from demolition, which was to turn it into a communications tower. And that then became quite central when World War I broke out. And it ended up actually being a crucial tool of espionage, which helped them to catch this stripper spy who was running havoc in France and was credited with causing up to 50,000 deaths, because she was so she was so successful as a burlesque dancer that she was sleeping with all these very famous and wealthy and influential French men. And she was then funneling information from them back to the Germans, and the French couldn't work out why the Germans were always one step ahead of them. And it literally was because of this incredibly successful spy who weaponized her beauty to try and beguile these men. And yeah, in the end, it was actually a communication that she sent that was coded, that was intercepted by the Eiffel Tower, then decoded by French authorities, which enabled them to catch her and kind of turn the tide of the war in some ways. So it's things like that. I mean, there is no plaque out the front of the Eiffel Tower that explains that. The tour guides don't mention it. And every time I was in these cities, because I also photographed the book, so I was going to all these landmarks along the way, I would always make sure to run these stories by every local that I met to try and make sure that it was actually something that was genuinely low profile. So yeah, that was the idea then, was Hidden in Plain Sight, which is the name of the book. And the idea is that even when you're at some of the most famous locations on the planet, there are still mysteries embedded in these locations. There's still things that the average person is not aware of. And I felt that that was particularly pertinent in 2026, when the internet and our smartphones and AI make it feel as if every bit of information we could possibly ever want is sitting right at our fingertips, and that there really is no mystery. There's no need to kind of learn or dig into things anymore, that everything is known. So yeah, that was what I loved about it, was the idea of showing that even in 2026, the world is still far too vast and far too volatile for it to have been fully catalogued by the internet.
Oh my God, there's so much in that I love. It's incredible, and like you said, in the age of AI, it's fascinating. This whole reversion to investigative journalism is going to become even more important, and that's exactly what you're doing. And to then have it out there in a book, how remarkable! What a fascinating story. How many countries did you go to, and are there any other stories like that really just blew your mind? Like that is really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there was so many across the journey, and unfortunately, some of my favorite ones didn't even make it into the book. Originally, I went to 35 countries, so I did photo shoots of 35 landmarks in 35 countries, which I did in the space of about 4 months. It was really hectic because I was just traveling solo the whole time. I had no one, helping me. And it ended up getting whittled down in the book to 23 landmarks in 23 countries for various reasons. But yeah, some of the other, I mean, there's so many other ones, like even ones that didn't get included in the book. For example, in Brussels, this is an extraordinary story, but it's also a very grim and dark story. Which it got cut out of the book in the end for various reasons. But in Brussels, there's this famous landmark called the Atomium, and it's a very unusual kind of sculptural building, which looks like a big shiny atom. And inside it is a museum these days. But when it was built, it was originally built for the World Expo. And I'm forgetting which year it is now because it was so long ago that I wrote it, but I think it was 1956. And so at the time, there was World Expos used to be a massive thing, and there was hundreds of thousands of people would travel to go to them. And during this World Expo, when I was digging into this and trying to find something about the history of Atomium, I came across the fact that one of the key exhibitions during this World Expo was a human zoo, and that the Belgians flew in hundreds of Congolese people against their will, put them inside this fake village, this primitive village, forced them to dress in like ragged primitive clothing that they thought fit where they came from and wasn't at all the way they normally dressed. And they were then forced in the cold all day to basically walk around and pretend that they were these primitive beings from Africa, while the Belgians came up to a fence and just gawked at them. They weren't allowed to talk to anyone local. They were harshly punished if they didn't do the right thing. And they were left in the cold all day, and a number of them became ill and died, and their corpses were then just discarded into unmarked graves. But this also was reflective of two things in the past. One was that this was something that the Belgians had done repeatedly, was this fascination with human zoos, of bringing in Africans from their colonies. The other was that the colonial history of Belgium is not nearly as well known because of the fame of the colonizing of their neighbors. So you've got the UK or England who colonized over 150 territories around the world. You've got Spain, you've got France, all of these, and Portugal. They were colonizing so many more countries, whereas Belgium just had the one colony, and that was in the Congo. And it was such a brutal colony that it actually resulted in several million deaths of Congolese people who were forced to work in mines and plantations under incredible duress. And as a result, it's kind of been lost to history a bit because of the fact that that's their only colony, whereas, like I said, these other major countries that are around them in Europe were colonizing dozens of countries. But this is not, there's no reflection of this when you go to the Atomium. Again, there's no sign, there's no plaque. It's something that really is forgotten to history. And the Belgians largely have tried to kind of sweep it under the carpet for many years. And it's only in the last generation that a new kind of progressive youth that's coming through in Belgium has said, look, we need to address this. We need to actually make amends for this. Similar to the way that Germany, for example, has been on the front foot for a long time about really being very open and honest about the Holocaust. And they literally have a national policy of making sure that they have all these memorials and things all around the country to remind everyone of what happened and what they engineered there. That was one story that I came across that it absolutely blew my mind to think that in 1956, when my parents were 8 years old in Ireland, just across the Irish Sea, something like this, a human zoo was occurring in what now Belgium is one of the world's most progressive countries and ranks very highly in so many different important social measures. But yeah, it shows you how quickly the world can move on. And it also shows you how easily that atrocities can, as the title of the book suggests, can just hide in plain sight.
Yeah, my God, absolutely. And it must have been so emotional photographing some of these places and the amount of research that must have gone into it, to discover these stories.
Yeah, I mean, often it was, I might spend a couple of days trying to research these places because I was so intent on finding things that weren't just little known, but that were barely known at all. And then particularly though, when I was writing the book, you do feel a lot of pressure because when you're tackling very weighty topics like that, it's very, very easy. It's not even about making an error with it. It's perhaps just that you portray one particular part of it in a light that someone does not appreciate. And it's very easy to get those things slightly wrong. And that's one thing that I was very familiar with from my background as a newspaper reporter, is just the care that you have to put into stories and considering every possible way that a story or even a sentence, a word could be perceived by different types of readers and whether that could be inflammatory or disrespectful. There was a lot of, there was a huge amount of research that went into it. And I was also very fortunate that the editing that I got from the HarperCollins team over in the US was just outstanding. There were several editors that I worked with there who were so meticulous, and that really helped me as well to have the confidence to be able to tackle a lot of these weighty subjects, knowing that they were there as a backstop for me and helping me. So particularly Danielle Peterson from HarperCollins US. So shout out to Danielle. Thank you very much. It was a very, very involved process from the research point of view.
Yeah, God, I can only imagine. So what was maybe some of the best and worst experiences that you had in, of these? I mean, obviously some of those you've already told us must have been,
Yep.
I mean, not necessarily the worst, but that would obviously be very challenging. What were some other things that were maybe particularly challenging to shoot and do, and when you're on the ground trying to do the job, and also some of the best experiences that you had?
Yep. Well, logistically, it was very difficult doing all these photo shoots, originally in 35 countries. And I was having to travel so quickly. I couldn't afford to be staying 2-3 days per location. So often, for example, when I was in Europe, I would be in 7 countries in 7 days. I would just have one night per country and just get the train from one spot to the next to the next. So you then also are under pressure that if something goes wrong on the day with a photo shoot, you are suddenly in big trouble because you're going to have to try and double back. So, and that isn't always necessarily possible. Like when I was in the middle of the rainforest that hugs the border between Argentina and Brazil. And I was thinking, if I ever have to come back here from Perth, it's going to take like 30 hours each way. And when I was landing, I only had one day to do this photo shoot, and I was landing. The weather looked great. And then as we just pulled in to maybe a few hundred meters off the ground, suddenly we went into these clouds and there was just smashing rain. And I was going to photograph Iguazu Falls, which is the world's largest waterfall system. And yeah, when I arrived at the airport, it was raining so heavily, there was no way that I would been able to walk for kilometers through this rainforest to get to these waterfalls. And somehow just at the last minute, the downpour ended just after I got to my hotel, and held off for about 2 hours to give me enough time to just get in there, get my photos. And as I left, it started smashing down again. So I was just very fortunate. I mean, the same thing happened when I was when I was trying to do my photo shoot of Burj Khalifa in Dubai. I was based in Abu Dhabi because I was doing another photo shoot there. And I needed to get the bus to Dubai that day to do the Burj Khalifa photo shoot. It could only be done that day again. And when I got to the bus station, they told me something I somehow hadn't seen on the news, which was that the UAE just had the worst floods ever in their history. And all the roads were closed basically between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And so I overheard this group of tourists who were from Hungary, who were talking about this plan to try and get a taxi driver to take them there. And so I jumped in with them and said, look, if that's possible, I'd love to do that too. And so we ended up convincing this taxi driver from Ghana to take a bit of a risk with us and try and drive there. And we went down probably about 20 dead-end roads that were blocked off or that were inaccessible. We drove past literally thousands of abandoned cars, including cars that had to be worth $300,000-$400,000, just like gigantic Range Rovers and sports cars and all kinds of things. It was truly like post-apocalyptic kind of stuff. And anyway, we finally, after about 3 times as long as it normally takes to complete that journey, we finally got to Dubai, and I managed to do that photo shoot. And then the taxi driver waited around for me and took me back to Abu Dhabi that night. But yeah, it was basically what should have been a 2.5-hour round trip. It was about 12 hours, I think we did, of driving that day. And it was just constantly going down dead-end roads and then back, and dead-end roads and back, and Google Maps changing its alerts all the time. So I really have no idea how I got through all of that, because it was just pure luck in a lot of those cases. But you also asked me about some of the best times. I mean, I think, for example, like when I did the photo shoot in one of the landmarks in the book is the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland. And that's where my parents are from. And my brother offered, I was staying at my mum's house in Ireland in Mayo. And my half brother, who lives in the south of the country, he offered to come up and collect me and drive me down the coast. And then he actually joined me on that photo shoot. And that was a really amazing experience, because I'm so used to traveling by myself and always taking photos by myself. And to have my brother by my side while I was doing a photo shoot in Ireland for my first ever book was a really amazing thing. And we also got the most incredible day that you'll ever get in the Cliffs of Moher. I mean, it is a place that has got horrific weather. And somehow we got there. There was no wind. It was blue skies. It literally was like Perth. I'm looking out the sky now at a Perth winter's day, and it was like that. So yeah, that was probably the high point of it from the point of view of just kind of pure fun.
Wow, God, what an incredible personal and professional experience you've had in this whole journey. So we'll move on to what are some of your top tips for people who wanted to visit some of these landmarks? Like, what are some that are maybe those stories that you were just saying that are so remarkable? I mean, they can get your book and choose the ones they want to visit anyway. But what are some that you think? What are some tips maybe for people who were going to go? How would they best discover these landmarks in the best way and do it in a way that's you're not amongst masses of crowds?
Well, I think that it is very easy to avoid it. You've just got to go at the right time of day. Because you will notice that the reason that most of these locations get really crowded is because of tour groups arriving. Now, tour groups never arrive early because people are on holiday. They want to get up. They want to have their breakfast. The only time that tour groups will arrive early is in certain locations that are famous for like sunrises, that kind of stuff. Sometimes at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, for example, it can be quite busy. But it basically, especially in the early mornings, if you are able to peel yourself out of bed early in the morning, you will be so greatly rewarded at a lot of these locations. Like, for example, you could go to the Eiffel Tower at 5:30 a.m. as the sun's coming up. There'll be hardly anyone there. There'll be a few, Parisians maybe out on a walk in the morning before they're going to work, but there'll be barely any tourists there. And so you will earn yourself at least an hour or so of serenity as you can kind of absorb this location rather than feeling that you're part of a moving mass of people that are going through it and the kind of the clutter and all the noise pollution that happens with that. So for me, I think that's the number one thing. And especially on any given trip, you're not going to be going to a heap of really packed landmarks. There's probably only going to be a couple. So it's only a couple of days that you need to get up a bit earlier. And then you also buy yourself some time to go back to the hotel and rest after that. There's no reason you can't go back and chill out, order some room service for lunch or something like that and have a couple of hours and then head back out in the afternoon. And in general, I mean, just as a more general travel tip, that's something that I always recommend to people. People seem to think that when you go out, you're on holiday and you go out for the day, that it's like one big long day out. But as long as you're not straying too far from your hotel, I always recommend to people, go out in the morning for a couple of hours and then come back and rest and then go out fresh again. And that can then carry you through as well into the evening. Whereas if you go out in the morning and you're trying to stay out into the evening, well, by the time you're ready for dinner and some drinks, you're knackered now and you kind of can't be bothered. You want to go back to the hotel. So yeah, look, people always get very excited on holiday and they want to do everything, they want to see everything. But if you've got that ability to slow down at times and just try and manage your schedule a bit more cleverly, I think that's a key tip for traveling.
That's such great advice. Right, well, we are unfortunately running out of time because I could talk about this for hours and can't wait to delve into your book. And we will put links to everything in the show notes. But we're going to ask the question we ask all of our guests, the last question, which is, what's the most bizarre thing, and I'm sure you've got plenty, that's ever happened to you on your travels?
I have an unbelievable amount of bizarre things that have happened because since I started travel journalism, I pretty much have paid for all my own trips, like about 95% of my costs for travel. So especially in the early days when I wasn't earning a lot, I just had to travel so cheap. So I was staying in random backpacker kind of places. I'm traveling on local buses and trains. And so you put yourself in some odd situations. But yeah, the one that comes to mind is when I was in probably about 10, 11, 12 years ago, I was in Osaka, and as I was leaving my hotel, the front desk said, "Sorry, you need to check out." And I didn't realize I hadn't booked enough nights in this hotel. So I said, "Oh, I'll just pay for another night." And they said, "Sorry, we're booked out. And there's a big event on in Osaka this weekend. It's going to be very hard to get accommodation." And they were right. I couldn't find anything other than really expensive accommodation. So I went back to this place I've been staying and I asked for advice. And they said, "Look, the only thing we know is that there is some internet cafes just down along the road here that have private booths that you can rent by the hour. And some people that are down on their luck will sleep there some nights." And so I went and I had a look at this place and they were advertising these fully private booths with a curtain. And so I thought, well, this is going to have to be it. I'll just have to sleep on the floor on the carpet in this place. But what I realized then as I was trying to go to sleep, I noticed it was just all single guys that were in these cubicles on the computers. And I started to hear the kind of low hum of what sounded like some adult content and all kinds of strange movements around me. And I realized that this was actually somewhere, because we're talking 12, 13 years ago when people didn't always have ready access to the internet. People would go here, men would go here to watch these movies and obviously to enjoy themselves. And I was suddenly lying on the ground trying to sleep in the middle of a place that did not seem to be being used for sleep by anyone else. But
And wondering about the hygiene of the carpet you're lying on.
yeah. And when my wife called me and asked how the trip was going, I kind of explained that. I explained that whole scenario far too quickly. And so it to her, it seemed as if I volunteered to go into some kind of room where all of this was going on. She's like, "Sorry, run that by me again. You did that."
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Oh, it's been so great to chat with you. And yeah, like I said, we'll put links to Hidden in Plain Sight in the show notes, and look forward to following your journeys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kirstie.
That was photographer and author Ronan O'Connell talking about his new book, and you can find him at ronanoconnell.com. Our tip this week is the things to avoid if you don't want your travel insurance claim declined. So while you are, of course, always doing the right thing and getting travel insurance, there are some things that you're not going to be covered for.
Yeah, so Covermore has come up with the top costly travel mistakes to avoid, and we'll put the full list in the show notes. But the first one is having too many drinks or taking recreational drugs when you travel. So Covermore is at the more relaxed end of this as far as insurers go, because some don't cover you if you have any alcohol at all. They just won't cover you. But Covermore says that it does cover claims related up to having a BAC of 0.19%. So for context, that's 4 times Australia's legal driving limit. So yeah, anyway, the key is here, don't get messy, people.
Also, getting on a motorcycle and a moped without a helmet, valid license or appropriate cover, which might seem obvious, but, and we do love a good example, here's one. Australian travellers crashed while riding a moped in Bali, which of course we know is unfortunately a really common experience. This person fractured their skull, injuring their brain as a result, and the insurance policy included the right level of moped cover for their requirements, which meant the cost of their medical costs and additional expenses claim paid out to more than $116,000. But without that cover, of course, you're out of pocket by almost $120,000, not to mention the impairment that you've got from the original injury.
Yes, younger generation need to hear this. My oldest son's about to go to Bali, and I did say to him, you have to get travel insurance. Make sure you count that into your costs, because he was complaining about the cost of the flight. And he was like, oh, we probably don't need it. And I'm thinking, no, yes, you do. And this is the problem. A lot of insurers I've spoken to recently, the insurance companies have said exactly that there is a generation out there that just think they don't need it and don't realise how important it is. So some others on the list are when you're hitting the slopes without purchasing winter sports cover, and also adventure activities like skydiving and underwater diving. Obviously, you have to make sure you get the right cover for those. And also think about how many activities, because you can actually be covered for a certain number. I think Covermore do 80, and then exactly what they are. So even things like the depth you're diving. So you're usually only covered for under 5 meters.
Also, getting a tattoo or piercing while on holiday and getting an infection, or worse, like a blood transmitted infection like Hep C, is also not covered. So maybe get that one done at home. And a similar thing applies to many medical or cosmetic procedures. There are a lot that aren't covered, such as plastic surgery, Botox, fillers, and also teeth whitening. I wonder about hair transplants.
Yes.
What do you reckon?
Scenic flights, cruise, and hopping aboard private boats in international waters are also things to look out for. So an example here was there was an Australian who went on a cruise from Dubai to Singapore, and they started having some pain in their leg, and it soon was established that they actually had deep vein thrombosis, and they ended up being out of pocket for thousands of dollars because they didn't get cruise cover. So if you're on a cruise, you have to have specific cruise cover, and you also can't get cover if you're on a private boat or you're in international waters, and we will put a link to all of that in the show notes.
Next week, my guest is Sally McKinnon, who is a stylist and also the author of the book Styled. And we're going to talk, she's just so knowledgeable about all things packing. And also she's got some really great ideas about keeping your luggage tight and taking away the headache of knowing what to pack and what to wear when you're on holiday. So stay tuned for that one.
So keen on tight packing, considering I'm a terrible overpacker. And we'd love it if you followed us on socials. You'll find us at The World Awaits Podcast on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And feel free to drop us a line at hello@theworldawaits.au. Or if you're enjoying this episode, please give us a rating and review.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.